The city of Harrowgate was ordinary by most standards: glass towers, subway lines rumbling beneath the streets, cafes where people drank coffee too quickly to taste it. Adults bustled about, consumed by errands, deadlines, and the endless hum of survival. They saw cracked sidewalks, grey skies, and streetlights flickering with neglect. But children saw something else. In the corners of alleys, behind dumpsters, inside the reflections of rain-soaked windows, lurked monsters. Some were grotesque horned, hunched, with skin like melted wax. Others were deceptively beautiful, with shimmering eyes and inviting smiles that hid rows of teeth sharp as razors. These monsters had always been there, woven into the fabric of Harrowgate, but only children could see them. It had always been that way, and it was a rule the children had learned not to speak of. 10-year-old Eli Matthews woke with a start. His sheets were damp with sweat, his small chest heaving. Another nightmare. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at the clock. 3:07 a.m. The whispering hadn't stopped. It slithered through the cracks in his bedroom walls, curling in his ears like smoke. Eli, come closer, don't be afraid. He shoved his head under the covers, gripping his flashlight like a sword. He wasn't supposed to tell anyone, not his mom, not his teacher, not even his best friend Lila. Because whenever kids told adults about the monsters, the same thing always happened. The adults smiled sadly, patted their heads, and said, "It's just your imagination." But Eli knew better, because last week, he had seen one in broad daylight. He had been walking home from school when he spotted it perched atop a traffic light, its long arms stretching down toward the cars. Its face was hidden under a cracked porcelain mask, and in its hand, it clutched a child's shoe. The next morning, news spread that a boy from Eli's school had gone missing. Eli shuddered. He pushed the flashlight beam toward his closet. The door stood slightly open, even though he always made sure it was shut. His heart pounded. He knew what was behind it. Two glowing eyes blinked back at him. Lila Torres was the only person Eli trusted with the truth. She was 11, brave in the kind of way kids are before the world teaches them to be careful. Lila lived 2 streets over, in an apartment with peeling wallpaper and a grandmother who never noticed when Lila stayed out past curfew. That morning, Lila found Eli waiting for her at the corner. His face was pale, and he kept glancing over his shoulder. "They're getting closer," Eli whispered. Lila narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" "My closet. Last night, I saw one." She didn't laugh, didn't tell him he was crazy. She just nodded. "I saw one too." Eli froze. "What?" "By the playground, hiding under the slide. It had teeth in its hands." She shivered. "I didn't tell anyone, but I think they're everywhere." The two children walked in silence for a while, the weight of the shared secret pressing down on them. They passed adults who seemed oblivious, scrolling on phones or carrying briefcases. No one noticed the shadow slithering up a brick wall or the 2 long fingers curling out of a storm drain. "Why us?" Eli finally asked. "Because we can see them," Lila said simply. "And that means we're supposed to do something about it." That afternoon, instead of going home, Eli and Lila went to the old Harrowgate library. Most kids avoided it. The place smelled of mildew, and the lights flickered as if haunted. But Lila insisted, "If we want answers, this is where we'll find them. My abuela says all the old stories are buried here." The librarian was a thin woman with owl-like glasses. She hardly looked up when the children tiptoed inside. They wandered the dusty aisles until they found the section labeled Local Legends and Folklore. Lila ran her fingers over cracked spines until one book caught her eye, the children's sight. She pulled it down, and a cloud of dust rose into the air. Inside, the pages described ancient tales from Harrowgate's past, stories of creatures that fed on fear, shadows that slipped between worlds, and a curse that ensured only children could perceive them. Eli leaned closer to read the faded ink. When the eyes of innocence dim with age, so too does the sight. The curse ensures the truth is hidden, for the world cannot bear its own monsters. Lila's hands trembled as she turned the page. But when the balance breaks, the sighted must act, or the city will fall into shadow forever. Eli whispered, "That's us." A sound echoed from the far side of the library, a low, guttural growl. The children froze. They weren't alone. The next morning, the whispers still clung to Alex like cobwebs. He couldn't forget the long, slithering shadow from the playground. At breakfast, his mother hummed to herself, reading the news on her phone. She didn't see how the spoon in the sugar bowl bent and twisted, as if invisible fingers were playing with it. Alex's little sister, Lily, did. Her wide brown eyes stared at the spoon, then flicked to her brother. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was only 6, but she already knew better than to speak of the things only children could see. "Eat up, or you'll be late," their mother said, completely unaware. On the way to school, Alex noticed them again, the faint, quivering outlines of hunched shapes that clung to rooftops. Some looked like crows made of smoke. Others had too many limbs, dragging themselves along telephone wires. Every once in a while, one of them turned its hollow face toward him. He felt a chill crawl up his spine. When they arrived at school, The playground was loud with laughter. But scattered among the children were the shadows. They stood taller than any adult, thin like reeds, with gaping mouths that never moved. They seemed to feed off the children's noise, leaning close as if inhaling their joy. Alex nudged his best friend, Jonah. Do you see that? He whispered, pointing to the edge of the swings. Jonah looked, then went pale. Yeah, he whispered back. I thought it was just me. That was when Alex realized the truth. Adults couldn't see them but kids could. All of them. At recess, Lily tugged on his sleeve. They're getting closer, she said softly, eyes darting around. Alex followed her gaze. The monsters weren't staying in the corners anymore. They were circling, bold, moving among the children like shadows that had come alive. One stopped at the sandbox, watching the toddlers dig, its mouth opening wider and wider until it seemed like it would swallow them whole. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. He sat up in bed, staring at the window. Beyond the glass, one of the monsters was perched on the fire escape. Its body was made of flickering static, its eyes empty holes. It pressed a hand against the windowpane, long, blackened fingers that left no mark. And then, in a voice like wind through broken glass, it whispered his name. Alex. For the next week, Daniel, Clara, and Sam moved cautiously through the city. Every evening after homework and dinner, they sneaked out into the streets with their flashlights, whispering plans like soldiers in enemy territory. The city felt alive in a way it never had before. Shadows seemed to linger too long, street lamps flickered when no wind stirred, and behind every closed shopfront, there was the possibility of something monstrous lurking. But they also discovered something strange. The monsters weren't just wandering aimlessly. They watched, from rooftops, from alleys, from behind dumpsters. Dozens of glowing eyes followed the children as if cataloging them. The creatures didn't always attack. Sometimes they just stood in silence, tall and hunched, like grotesque guardians of some secret the children weren't meant to uncover. One night, Clara insisted they climb the old clock tower near City Hall. We'll see everything from up there, she said, gripping her flashlight like a sword. Sam nearly refused, but curiosity pulled him along. From the top of the tower, the city stretched out like a black ocean. But the children gasped when they looked down. The streets below were full. Hundreds of shadowed figures slithered and crawled. Monstrous shapes tall as buses, thin as wires, hunched with wings like torn umbrellas moved silently through the city. But none of the adults walking home from late shifts noticed. Look at 'em, Clara whispered, her face pale in the moonlight. They're everywhere. They're organized, Daniel muttered, pointing. And it was true. The creatures weren't random. They moved in patterns circling certain blocks, clustering around certain buildings. Almost like guards. Then Sam froze. His flashlight beam caught something unusual. A small monster, no bigger than a dog, was crouched at the tower's base. Its eyes burned gold, not red. Unlike the others, it didn't hiss or retreat. Instead, it looked directly at them calmly. Then, to their shock, it whispered, "Help." The children nearly stumbled backward. Monsters didn't speak. Monsters hissed, clawed, and vanished at dawn. But this one's voice was fragile, pleading. "What do you mean?" Clara hissed down, her courage surprising even herself. The golden-eyed creature tilted its head. "Not all of us want this." Its voice cracked, and then the other monsters turned sharply toward it. The children realized too late. It had betrayed itself. A wave of black shadows surged toward the golden-eyed monster. It screeched a sound of pain, not rage, and then dissolved into smoke before their eyes. The others turned their heads up to the tower. Hundreds of glowing eyes locked on Daniel, Clara, and Sam. For the first time, the monsters moved as one, rushing toward the tower. "Run!" Daniel shouted, pulling his friends down the stairs as the old wooden beams shuddered from the weight of something clawing at the walls. And in that moment, they understood the truth. These weren't just monsters. They were hiding something, protecting something, and one of them had just died trying to tell the children. The air over Haven Hollow shimmered like liquid glass. The once faint hum that only the children heard was now a chorus, low, thrumming, vibrating through every bone in their bodies. Lila stood in the square, hand clasped tightly in Jonas's. Dozens of children had gathered, eyes wide, faces pale but unblinking. Above them, the shadows of monsters rippled across the buildings, tall and skeletal, some with many arms, some with mouths where eyes should be. Yet none of the adults stirred in their homes. They slept through it all, dreaming harmless dreams while the true battle loomed outside. Elder Myra's voice cracked through the silence. "The night of choosing is upon us. Tonight, you will stand between two worlds, the unseen and the ordinary. The monsters cannot be banished. They can only be chosen. Some will devour, some will protect. The choice belongs to you." The children whispered nervously, but no one stepped back. From the fog at the far end of the square, the first monster emerged. Its limbs were too long, bending like liquid shadows, eyes glowing violet. It leaned low, staring at Lila. She could feel it pressing into her chest, testing her courage. "Name me," it hissed, though the sound was more in her head than her ears. Lila's knees shook. She remembered Elder Myra's words. A monster unnamed is a monster untamed. She swallowed. You are the hollow hunger. The monster froze, its violet glow dimming, and then it bowed once, sharply before retreating to the fog. Gasps filled the air. Jonas whispered, awestruck, you commanded it. But not all went as smoothly. Some children tried to name their monsters and failed. The beast shrieked, tearing through the fog before vanishing into the night, leaving the chosen child trembling, marked with a black vein along their arm. Elder Myra's face was grim. Those who fail will live haunted. The mark binds them. The night stretched on. One by one, the children faced their monsters, each naming, binding, or failing. Jonas's turn came, and his monster towered like a giant stitched from shadows. He gritted his teeth, and with a steady voice declared, you are the silent watcher. The beast froze, then bent low, vanishing with a guttural hum. Jonas's eyes glowed faintly for a moment, as though he had inherited part of the creature's vision. When Lila's second trial came, the fog split open, and a different monster crawled forth. This one was small, childlike, with glassy eyes that mirrored her own face. It smiled her smile but stretched too wide. Name me, it whispered in her voice. Her heart pounded. It was her own fear-given form. If she named it wrong, it would own her forever. Tears stung her eyes, but she lifted her chin. You are the shadow of doubt. The childlike monster blinked, then collapsed into dust. The hum ceased. The fog rolled back, and Elder Mira spoke once more. You have survived the night of choosing. But remember, what you claim tonight is yours forever. The monsters live within you now, bound but never gone. Protect this city, for soon the veil will tear, and even the adults will see. Lila looked at Jonas, his eyes still faintly glowing. She felt both stronger and more afraid than ever before. The city was theirs to defend, children against the darkness, and the true war was only beginning.